So today, let's talk about Belgium. It's a country that, when you really look at it, is one of modern Europe's biggest, most fascinating paradoxes.
I mean, for centuries, this tiny little patch of land was right smack in the middle of almost every major European war you can think of. It was a place literally defined by conflict and division. So the question is, how?
How did that exact same spot completely transform itself into the, undisputed capital of European peace and unity? It's a wild story, and that's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today.
In this slide, wow, it really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one hand, you have these nicknames like the battlefield of Europe or the cockpit of Europe, basically the place where all the great powers came to fight. But on the other hand, it's the heart of the European Union and the home of NATO. I mean, talk about a glow-up. So, to figure out how this happened, we've got to go way back to a time before Belgium was even, well, Belgium.
Okay, so from most of history, you have to understand the idea of Belgium as one independent country, it just wasn't a thing. It was more like a concept, a really important piece on the European chessboard that everybody wanted to control.
I mean, look where it is. It's just squished right between Europe's heavy hitters, so of course it was a constant crossroads. It got swallowed up by huge empires, then it would break apart into tiny little states. The great powers were always fighting over it, and a really key moment was when its southern part officially split from what we now know as the Netherlands, after that incredibly long and brutal 80 Years' War.
So that brings us to the 1800s, and this is where the modern country of Belgium is finally born. But here's the kicker. It wasn't some grand, carefully laid plan. Nope. It was almost an accident, born out of a totally unexpected rebellion.
Okay, this timeline really drives the point home. You can just see it being passed around like a hot potato for centuries. First, the Burgundian dukes have it, then the Spanish Habsburgs, then the Austrian Habsburgs, then boom, revolutionary France takes over. And after Napoleon is finally defeated, it gets lumped in with the Netherlands. See? It was always a territory, never really its own country. That is, until one very important year.
1830. Get this, it all kicks off at an opera in Brussels. An opera. It sparks a riot, and that riot snowballs into a full-blown revolution against the Dutch king. You can't make this stuff up. So, all the other big European powers look at this and get nervous. They're thinking, oh no, this could blow up into a huge war. So they step in. At this big meeting in London, they do something pretty amazing. They actually recognize Belgium as a brand new, independent, and this is key, permanently neutral state. And just like that, after all those centuries as a battlefield, it was finally a country. But the story doesn't end there. The fighting didn't stop. It just moved inside its new borders.
Right. So as soon as they weren't fighting outsiders anymore, a huge internal conflict exploded to the surface. And this was a fight that had been brewing under the surface for a very, very long time.
From day one, Belgium was basically two countries in one. You had the Dutch-speaking north, which is Flanders, and you had the French-speaking south, Wallonia. But back in the 1800s, this was way more than just about language. Wallonia was the economic engine, It had all the coal and steel. It was a powerhouse of the Industrial Revolution. Flanders, on the other hand, was seen as, well, more rural, more agricultural, kind of the backwater.
And this quote just nails the dynamic. French was the language of power. It's what you spoke in government, in the army, in polite society. The Dutch spoken in Flanders, it was treated as a second-class language for a second-class culture. And that created this deep, simmering resentment that would absolutely define Belgian politics for the next 100 years.
All right, let's jump forward to the 20th century, which was, well, just incredibly chaotic for Belgium. You've got 2 world wars, they lose their massive colony in Africa, and all those internal language fights just keep getting worse and worse. The country was basically forced to completely reinvent itself just to keep from falling apart.
I mean, it was just one thing after another. First, that neutrality that everyone had promised to protect, Germany just stomped all over it not once but twice in 2 world wars. Then, in 1960, the country goes through the traumatic loss of its huge and very profitable colony, the Congo. Meanwhile, back home, the linguistic wars are heating up big time. And then, and this is a huge deal, the economy completely flips. Wallonia's old industries start to die out, and Flanders starts to boom. The whole system was breaking down. They needed a totally new idea, and fast.
So what do? How do you keep a country like this from splitting in two? Well, the Belgian solution was kind of brilliant and kind of crazy. To hold it together, they decided to take it apart. Seriously,
Through a whole series of reforms, they just systematically dismantled the central government. They created these communities to handle all the cultural stuff like language, and then they created regions to handle the economy. By 1993, the old centralized Belgium was dead and gone. In its place was one of the most complicated federal systems anywhere on Earth.
Okay, so this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. How does all of this, the history, the division, the compromise, answer our big question? How did the battlefield become the capital?
Well, first, you have to remember its entire history. Belgium has always been a crossroads, right? A place where different cultures, languages, and armies have always met and mixed. It was never built to be one single unified thing. And second, because of that, just to survive, it had to get really good at one specific thing: compromise. It had to learn how to balance all these deep internal divisions through constant, painful, difficult negotiation. That process, that art of compromise, became its entire identity.
And that's the answer. The very thing that defines Belgium, being a nation built on a delicate, complicated compromise between different cultures, made it the absolute perfect home, both symbolically and practically, for the European Union, which is, when you think about it, the biggest, most ambitious compromise project of them all.
So you see, Belgium's whole story is like a masterclass in how to manage conflict. But today, as its own internal politics get more and more fragmented, you have to wonder, can this incredibly complicated, delicate, and uniquely Belgian balancing act actually hold up in the future? That's the big question.